Hello, college football fans, and welcome to episode 35 of College Football Throwdown. I am your co-host, Alex Schmitz, and today I'm joined by my dad, Peter Schmitz.
Good afternoon or evening, I guess, depending on which coast you're on, to a college football fan.
Or it could be morning. You don't know when they're listening to this.
True.
All right. Yes, well, this is the College Football Throwdown, a college football podcast by college football fans for college football fans. And we are back onto the Skype, as you can probably hear. I am now back in Los Angeles after my nice Christmas and New Year's trip home.
It was great time for all.
That's true. And so we're here today to talk about the kind of recap the predictions we made on the bowl games and how the bigger games shaped out. You know, which games were good, which games were bad. You know, all that sort of stuff, and looking ahead to the national championship game that's now coming up. But before we get into that, we have our beverage to crack, as is our tradition here. So here
yes, and that can be you today, my friend.
All right, here we go. There we go.
All right. I'm drinking out of a bottle tonight.
Okay, got it. How do you think should we start with some of the lesser games and build up to the bigger ones, or should we start with the bigger ones, do you think?
No, I would say the lesser ones and build up to the big ones. Yep.
Okay. Well, I mean, the predictions we made were pretty much for the New Year's Six bowls. I guess the one other one we had was Northwestern and Tennessee.
Right.
Which,
and I think there was one New Year's Day 6 that we missed, which was the one that included Houston, because we included another game that wasn't, but it's not irrelevant to our conversation.
That's true. We didn't talk about Houston. Well, yeah. So you predicted we both predicted Tennessee victory, but I said 24-21, and you said 28-24. So we both ended up lowballing it there pretty badly, I'm afraid.
Yes, exactly.
Yes. Final score.
I really had some concerns that I believe even on the podcast I may have talked a little bit about that, but I expected that one to be heavily in favor of Tennessee, but I was hopeful that Northwestern would be able to hang with them, and Tennessee would maybe not be as motivated, but they were motivated.
That's true. Yeah, that one was a pretty dominant game. We watched part of it and then gave up because the final score ended up being 45-6.
Yes.
Which,
and that is not indicative of how lopsided it was. I mean, Northwestern could truly do nothing.
Yeah, that was kind of rough. I'm just looking here at some of the games that were being played, because we did a podcast before, obviously, on the Nebraska game, Nebraska UCLA, which turned out to be a Nebraska victory, which was quite a pleasant surprise for us. Some other games that happened around that time, we had Navy and Pitt. Navy ended up winning that one pretty handily, 44-28. Nice way to cap off a very good season for them.
Absolutely, and a little unexpected in my mind, because I thought Pitt, with all the time to prepare, would be able to get their team ready, especially given that Narduzzi's such a good defensive mind. I really thought that his team would be more prepared to stop, but they couldn't stop Navy.
Mm-hmm. And this is another one I believe we might have mentioned on the Nebraska podcast, that there was the potential for all of the 5 and 7 teams, the 3 who made it in to the bowl games, to win their bowls, and that did end up happening because Minnesota beat Central Michigan 21-14.
That's correct. That's correct. So, yeah, I don't know that that's justification for the 5 and 7 teams getting in, but it's just an interesting thing to observe.
Yeah. This is an interesting one. I'm not sure why I didn't watch this game, because it looks like it was pretty good. Baylor and North Carolina on the 29th.
It was probably because of just the timing of when it was on, but yeah, that was a good game.
Yep, and Baylor ended up winning 49-38, which is actually an upset because North Carolina was ranked 10th while they were 17th. So
right, and Baylor, I think, broke a 20-year-old Nebraska record for rushing in a bowl game. In that game, they had a ridiculous amount of rushing yards.
Well, good. Well, I was like seeing, nice dominant rushing yards in a game. That's always fun.
Absolutely,
That's right.
absolutely.
And this is one that we did watch, and this was very exciting. USC Wisconsin. That was a nail biter
Yes,
down to the very end.
yes, it was. And again, another surprising result. I thought, given that it was going to be out there in California, and everything, I wasn't sure what motivation level Wisconsin's team was going to have, and I felt like USC with the new coach and everything having already been named, and him being the guy who was the interim. I mean, it's his team now. You would have thought that they would have really come out fire and brimstone and stuff, but they came out cocky for sure. It was horrible, their behavior. I hope that's not indicative of that new coach, because if it is, then USC will quickly become the team I least like and most root against, because they were very chippy in that game. And that game also contained the one of the most horrific calls, and there were plenty during this whole bowl season, but one of the most horrific no calls or missed calls in the whole bowl season, in that a play that very likely could have decided the outcome of the game. Thank God that Wisconsin came back and won it, so that the right team won, but they were robbed of a substantial
Oh
touchdown
yeah, yeah.
because of a referee just making a bonehead decision, on something that should be pretty standard protocol, where if you can't see whether a guy stepped out or not, or you're not sure, you let the play continue, and let the video sort it out. You do not blow a whistle dead because you think somebody might have gone out. If you can't see it, you don't call it.
Yeah, I mean, to the guy's credit, I mean, it was a beautifully done by that player. I mean, he was right on the edge, but the video clearly shown the second that you saw it that he was in. So
Right, right. So so my point is that if you don't see it definitively, like it's obvious that he's out. If it's not obvious, don't call it, because that's the beauty. You have the replay. Use the replay official as if he was part of your team, part of your group that was on the field. Don't feel like he's contradicting you if he changes a call or makes a call you didn't upon review. Hey, no problem.
that's true.
Right?
Yep, and this is another interesting bowl game. Louisville, Texas A&M. Louisville scored 20 points in the first quarter, but ended up winning 27-21. So Texas A&M did manage to come back to keep it interesting, at least.
Right, right. And there seemed to be, well, we'll get to it eventually, but there were a few games like that where teams seemed to get out to an early lead, and then the other team certainly shot back into contention.
Oh yeah. Well, talking about that, I guess, because now we're getting in terms of I'm looking at ESPN.com here, and in terms of the timeline, now we're getting to the New Year's Six bowls, but there were some kind of lesser bowls just the other day on Saturday, and the biggest one of that would be the Oregon TCU game, which I was in the airport at the time, and I knew that we were listening to a little bit of it. And we knew that Oregon had gone up by like 30 points in the first half, so it didn't seem like it was going to be that interesting. But then I was keeping an eye on the score, and sure enough, I saw that TCU kept getting more points. And then when they were within a touchdown, I found my way over to a bar and watched as much of it on TV as I could before I had to get on my plane. And then you were texting me updates, and so that was kind of exciting.
That was crazy, absolutely crazy. I'm kind of disappointed. I suspect they probably replayed that today on ESPN. Maybe if not today, maybe they'll do it tomorrow. But that's an instant classic, man. That's a game you want to watch. I look forward to maybe recording that and watching that sometime.
Well, it is an instant classic, although, I mean, it's extremely clear why. I mean, the only reason Oregon lost that game is because they lost their quarterback, which gets back to what we said before, because I believe the same thing happened to I think it was either Baylor or TCU maybe in one of their games. They lost their quarterback, and all of a sudden they didn't look like nearly the offensive powerhouse that they had been just 5 minutes before,
Right, right. Yep, that happened to Baylor, and it happened to Oklahoma
Hmm.
against TCU, and then TCU, of course, had their quarterback be a bonehead idiot and got suspended. The night before the game or 2 nights before the game, so he didn't play either. So TCU was playing with a backup quarterback as well.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yep, yep. Their starter had gotten drunk and punched a cop. They're like 2 days before the game because
Jeez.
he's an idiot.
Wow.
So,
Well, impressive that they managed to do that. I saw it's actually like tied for second amongst biggest comeback wins in just FBS history in general. The only one that was more
wow.
was like a 35-point comeback by MSU.
Huh. Wow. Wow.
Yeah,
Did not know that.
pretty
I knew
crazy.
it was the biggest one in history of bowl games. I didn't realize it was that close to being, a historic
Yeah.
all game.
Yeah,
Huh.
actually, it's tied for the bowl game one. Actually, in 2006, also Texas Tech and Minnesota. Texas Tech came back against Minnesota by
Hmm.
31 points as well.
I think I remember that game.
There you go. What is it that you're munching there? By the way, I heard you opening up a bag.
I'm sorry. Yes. Okay. I'll be quiet.
Okay. um, and then another one that was like that was the Penn State Georgia game. It looked like Georgia went up by a lot early and looked like they were dominating the game. But then Penn State scored some points late in the fourth and it looked like they had the chance to tie
They
it up.
they did. They chipped away and worked at it. And ironically, they lost their quarterback. Penn State did to an injury and had to live with a backup, and still made it interesting at the end, even with the backup. So you just don't know.
That's right. And then another interesting one, West Virginia and Arizona State, 43-42, a real
Yeah.
slugfest.
Yes. Yeah, that's a little crazy.
Yeah, that would have been a good game to watch. I didn't get to catch that one. But okay, are there any other smaller ones you want to talk about? I think we're ready for the big boys.
Yep. Let's go with the big boys.
Okay, so we might as well start with the playoff games. Which was New Year's Eve. So we were off doing our respective New Year's Eve things. Actually, we were together for the Oklahoma Clemson game, and then by the time of the Michigan State game, I was over at a friend's house. Because obviously a lot of people in Michigan were very invested in that game. Talking about the Oklahoma Clemson game, that was one where the first half was good and competitive, good back and forth, and both teams were being very physical on defense, which I like to see. But Clemson definitely pulled away there in the second and started kind of dominating them.
Yes, absolutely. Yep. And I mean, obviously, I'm disappointed that Michigan State didn't put up a better fight, if you will. Right.
Right. Yep.
I mean, but the bottom line is that they needed to have success early, and when Connor Cook, when it was still early in the game, and I think it was 10-0 at the time, and Michigan State was able to put together a serious drive, and then Connor Cook throws a pick just a few minutes before
Oh
halftime.
yeah.
That was a killer for them. Had they been able to score a touchdown on that drive and gone in, and it had been 10-7, then quite possibly their approach and their attitude and everything about what was going on might have felt a lot different. But as it was, they went in already a little bit feeling like, what do we got to do to have some success against this Alabama defense? And then immediately in the second half, Alabama gets the ball and scores, and Michigan State isn't able to recover, and
Yeah.
it just kind of snowballs from there. And then it looks more lopsided than it probably ought to be in terms of the differential between the two teams. But there was no question that Alabama, was controlling the line of scrimmage, and Michigan State didn't have what it took to hang with them for 60 minutes in all likelihood.
Oh yeah. No, they. I pointed out that same thing. I think that play, that interception there, while they were having that nice drive in the near the end of the second quarter, I definitely think that was a turning point in the game. And I also agree. Just watching the game, Alabama's defensive line was just owning MSU's offensive line, which part of the reason Connor Cook was he obviously he didn't seem to be 100% recovered from his injury. He was wearing that brace, so there seemed to be something kind of off there. But just as important was the fact that his linemen weren't protecting him most of the time, and so he was having to throw on the fly and not getting to sit in the pocket, nice and comfortable very much at all in that game.
Right. I agree. I agree. So it is what it is. Then on that particular game, it was the beginning of a bad indication, if you will, for the Big Ten, at least for some of its highly regarded teams. The two in the Big Ten championship both struggled in their bowl games, and Michigan State's was the first of those two.
Yeah, and you won out this time in terms of our predictions. I went for the underdog in both these games. I said Oklahoma was going to win against Clemson 52-49, and you said that Clemson was going to win 42-38. So you were definitely closer there, although both of us were definitely predicting high scoring, very close games there.
Right. I think we both felt like both offenses would be able to have some success, and so you got to tip your hat to Clemson because they certainly made things more difficult. And it just seemed game plan wise, I would question Oklahoma's choices a little bit in that game. Oklahoma did not appear, and I know that they had a number of injuries throughout the game to their running backs and such. So there were some things going on there that we don't know about, but they certainly didn't seem to get themselves connected to their running game at all, and as a result, nothing ever got going. They never got into sync.
Yep, and then similarly for MSU Alabama, even though I believed Alabama was the better team, I believed MSU could win, and so I predicted MSU over Alabama 21-17, whereas you said Alabama would win 21-17. So you were right in picking Alabama, although it definitely ended up being much more lopsided than either of us expected.
Right. So we got, as far as picking those games, I got both of those then, right?
Yep, you did.
Okay.
All right. And then you're right, Houston, Florida State, we missed that one on our bowl predictions podcast. And I don't think I really watched much of this one, but that ended up being a Houston victory, 38-24. Looks like they kind of dominated, going up 21-3 in the first half.
Yeah, they did. They did. And, it's interesting. That's a team, Houston, that we'll be keeping our eyes on as we go forward to next year because they're a team that has a lot of youth, a lot of guys coming back. And given their schedule, they're probably going to find themselves in a situation where they have a chance to be very much in the thick of this playoff situation. And with all the kind of recognition they got this year, they've built the goodwill you need to build as one of those teams to get serious consideration.
Oh, yeah.
And they get a couple of early chances next year. They play Oklahoma early in a non-conference game, and then later Louisville in a non-conference game, and I would expect they'll run through their conference. So if they could find a way to beat Oklahoma early next year, watch out for Houston.
Yeah, no, that would be interesting. I mean, the only way any of these kind of lesser, what do they call them, the five non-power conference teams,
right. Group of five.
There we go. I was looking for that. For any of them to kind of make it in, unless you're Notre Dame, you really need to dominate your conference and go undefeated, and beat at least one or two, FBS or Group of Five or Power Five, I guess I should say Power Five teams, to prove that you deserve to be in that kind of top 10 consideration.
Right.
Yep. All right, and then so that other Big Ten team you were talking about there, that would be the Iowa-Stanford game, which both of us predicted that Stanford was the better team and that Iowa would struggle to score. So you predicted a 35-14 victory. I predicted 28-14. So we were both about right in terms of how much Iowa would score against Stanford, but I think both of us maybe had higher expectations that Iowa's defense would slow them down, and that certainly did not happen.
Right, that's true. Well, and that's the thing is that Stanford got out so quick out of the box that then it became, Iowa had never. I think they showed a stat that Iowa had never been 14 points behind the entire year, and Iowa was, as I have argued on here a couple times before, Iowa was the beneficiary of a very generous schedule combined with some really fortuitous luck throughout the course of the season that put them in positions where they could kind of dictate games and circumstances throughout the whole process of going undefeated during the regular season, including ultimately in the last game against us, where we doubled them in yardage and first downs and all the statistical categories, but because our quarterback kept throwing it to them, you just can't defeat a team when you keep giving them more and more opportunities and pick sixes and the like. And then even in the Michigan State conference championship game, they continued to have some of the benefits of that sort of thing, where they were playing a Michigan State team that clearly had an injured quarterback who they were trying to protect a little bit. And we're going to find out more about the whole Michigan State thing. I'm convinced that Connor Cook was injured even in the Alabama game, and he was playing with less than a full deck, if you will, in terms of his capabilities, because he did not look sharp at all. And I think that injury had a lot more to do with that than maybe people are willing to admit.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And this reiterates what I've said on a previous podcast, that I believe Christian McCaffrey should have won the Heisman this year. I think he's, after seeing him in that Pac-12 conference championship game, I mean, he wowed everybody there big time. And in this game, he did it again, like 300 plus, like all-purpose yards, between his rushing and his receptions, passing, and all that stuff. I mean, he's just a stud.
He is a heck of a player, and Derrick Henry was also an outstanding player. But I would agree with you that if I was voting, I would have voted McCaffrey number one and Henry number two.
Yep. All right, and then thankfully there was some other Big Ten teams did step up to the plate in their games. Ohio State against Notre Dame, which turned out to be a pretty good game, and Notre Dame ended up kind of pulling away with that, 44-28.
You mean Ohio State?
What did I say?
You said Notre Dame, but Ohio State
Dame
won the game, and
yes,
yeah, and Ohio State had that pretty comfortably in hand most of the time.
Yeah. I mean, they were winning by 14 points at halftime, so that's a pretty comfortable place to be, even though you're not dominating like Alabama was against MSU.
Right. And then, that's correct. And again, that was a good matchup. People were excited about that matchup. I don't know that Notre Dame played poorly. I just think Ohio State was better. And it begs the question, kind of what could have been, right? Because Ohio State's only loss then is to Michigan State, and they were playing Michigan State with a backup quarterback, and they still couldn't beat them. And that is absolutely on them. And they should have been able to find a way. And ironically, it was as a result of that loss. Urban Meyer took more of an interest in the offensive play calling and the offensive game planning in future weeks, and overall just greater interest in the team, and they played better. So the question becomes, kind of what if?
Right.
For them.
And also in terms of the Big Ten, I mean, it would appear in terms of which Big Ten team is playing the best football as of right now at the end of the season. Ohio State would seem to be showing that they are the top team right now. So, if they had played against Alabama instead of MSU, it would have been a different story.
Well, I think certainly Ohio State would have been able to be more competitive than Michigan State was able to demonstrate. I believe that is true.
Yeah. We both predicted that game as well. Both predicted Ohio State victory, although you predicted 35-21, whereas I said 38-35. So I had it pecked a little closer than you did, and I turned out being wrong in that regard.
Yep. So, but that, that maybe leads me to a whole general point to make, which is it is incredible how unpredictable bowls are. And so much of it is attitude. And what team shows up, and with the exception of a few of the top games, where you can anticipate both teams really genuinely being there mentally. There's an awful lot of games where you can do all the analysis of the world in terms of identifying what they did during the course of their regular seasons, and what conferences they come from, and who challenged them and who didn't, and all that stuff. Look at turnover ratios, and none of it matters. None of it matters. It all depends on which team shows up motivated. Team, when I say team, I mean coaching staff and team, and which ones aren't. Because it seems like fairly quickly, you figure it out which team was that wanted to be there. Yep. And you got some weird things like Temple getting beat. I think it was by Toledo. Yep. Toledo lost their head coach. Temple had a great year, nearly beat Notre Dame, probably should have. Beat Penn State, had a great year within their conference, and was a very, very talented team. It's shown that all year. Very good defensively, et cetera, et cetera. And they got their doors blown off by a Toledo team that didn't even have its head coach anymore. Now, Toledo was good, but you would have expected Temple to handle them. Well, clearly Temple thought they were just going to be able to show up and win, I guess. I mean, that's the only explanation for how they could look so bad in that game, right? And so it's about attitude. And there were numerous other games like that too, where you really had to question whether both teams showed up.
Yep. Well, and that gets, I believe we talked about this on one of our previous ones about, Tom Osborne made a comment about what his kind of strategy was in terms of, and how it changed over time as he kind of saw trial and error of what worked and what did in terms of how he should do practices during that month, between the end of the regular season and the bowl games, because different coaches have different philosophies in terms of how to prep your players versus how much time to get them off and that kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah. So. Okay, and then one of the other big ones was Oklahoma State Ole Miss. This time I actually got you. You predicted Oklahoma State 45-35 over Ole Miss, whereas I said Ole Miss was going to win 38-31. Turned out to be a 48-20 victory where they went up big in the first half and kind of controlled the game.
I got to give Ole Miss some credit because I was a little critical of them on the last podcast. I genuinely thought that without a couple of their key players, that Ole Miss's defense was going to be a little more susceptible to an Oklahoma State team that I viewed as being fairly prolific offensively, and I didn't figure either team had the defensive wherewithal to dramatically slow down the other one, especially given some of the missing pieces for Ole Miss. But they showed up both offensively and defensively, and losing the Kim Deitchi folks didn't matter.
Yep. Well, and unfortunately, I think when you look back at Oklahoma State's record, they did, they pounded on the teams that were lesser than them. They were great when they got out into a lead, but in terms of coming back from behind and playing teams that were of equal or greater talent than them, they definitely.
Well, I would say they fall in the same category as Iowa, where they were the beneficiary of a very easy early season schedule that allowed them to build up a 7, 8, 9 win type of schedule initially, and then Oklahoma got exposed before the end of the season because they had kind of a row of games at the end that was going to be put up or shut up time, and they were shut up basically because they lost I think the last 3 games they played in the conference, and then their bowl game. So they're on a 4-game losing streak. Whereas similarly for Iowa, frankly they got beat up by us, even though they won the game, and then they got beat by Michigan State and then beat by Stanford. So it's just one of those things where when you start to when the stakes are elevated and the other team shows up with talent and motivation, it's a different story.
Yep. And then the final one would be the Michigan-Florida game in the Citrus Bowl. I had kind of said on the previous podcast I thought that this was one that Michigan could win comfortably. I predicted a 31-14 kind of victory. You predicted a 27-21 victory for Michigan. So I guess I ended up being closer in terms of the point spread, although I was still lowballing it, as it turns out. A 41-7 dominant win for them.
It was a very impressive victory for Michigan. They looked good. Again, their senior quarterback looked very good, and their receivers were fabulous. And just overall, they were just very crisp, and their execution was very high. And Florida was not.
Yeah.
Bottom line is, and there were some huge busted coverages. I don't know why Florida seems so confused. Either Michigan really confused them, or Florida confused themselves. I suspect it's a little bit of the latter, because Florida had been so good throughout the season defensively, and they just didn't seem to be all on the same page, because there were a lot of times where they were yelling at each other, looking at each other like, who was supposed to do that?
Right. Yeah, that is what surprised me about it, because I knew that Florida's offense wasn't very good and that they were going to struggle to score. But yeah, I mean, Florida's defense held off Alabama for 2.5 quarters during that championship game. But Michigan didn't have a problem with them.
No, that's right. And that obviously paints a good picture for Michigan going forward, and specifically next year, what they might be able to do if they can find themselves a quarterback who can pull the trigger with the kind of continuity and consistency gosh, what was his name? The Iowa transfer, who played quarterback for them this year. He came in and was a good decision maker, generally speaking, and threw the ball with protection, and did a good job.
Right. All right. Well, what would you say now, looking back on this kind of bowl season? Because I know there are some people who have been kind of down on it, given that a lot of the big games, the New Year's Six games, the playoff games, turned out to be kind of one-sided matchups. They weren't as competitive as some people were expecting them to be.
Well, again, that's the nature of bowl games. But in terms of creating a slate of games that made sense based on the team's regular season records, the results that they had from this year, and then just looking at it from a matchup standpoint, I thought that the bowl season represented a great opportunity for some phenomenal football, and it was a great series of matchups. I don't know that if they had changed or reshuffled the deck in terms of who played who, that there would have been dramatically different outcomes. Other than the possibility that maybe Michigan State and Iowa, maybe you flip flop Michigan State and Iowa with Ohio State and Michigan in those two respective games, and maybe the outcomes aren't different, but maybe it's more competitive. But just based on what you saw, during the games, but I think it was exactly what we hope to get accomplished with this whole playoff thing. But what's going to be interesting to me going forward is the issue of New Year's Eve versus New Year's Day, and I know there's a lot of tradition and history there that they're trying to work around, which prompts this New Year's Eve thing. But there's already a lot of media hype about the reduced overnight numbers as far as television viewers for these two playoff games. So it'll be interesting to see what happens as we go forward with this.
Yep. Yeah. I was talking to you the other day. I think if it won't happen immediately, but if they get several years worth of data that are showing them that consistently, the New Year's Eve time isn't getting the numbers that they want. They might kind of force the Rose Bowl and those guys to kind of try to compromise with them and say, hey guys, you want to split this money too, don't you? Wouldn't you like a bigger pot?
Right. And I don't know how you solve that thing without those guys making some significant concessions, and I don't know how ready or willing they are to do that.
Right. All right. So now this whole playoff system has now given us our national championship game for the next Monday. Alabama and Clemson, number 1 and number 2. So definitely.
And I would say that says it did its job.
Yeah, they knew who the top teams were. So what do you think about this matchup, and what are your predictions in terms of who you think is going to win?
Well, I think it's an interesting matchup because it's contrasting styles, which is opposite of what the semifinals were, which was, competition between teams of similar styles. I'm always more of a defense first kind of guy, and I've always been a believer that if you have an outstanding championship caliber defense, then all you need to be is effective and efficient offensively. And Alabama was a picture of efficiency. If Alabama's quarterback can play with the kind of efficiency that he played with against Michigan State, a defense that I consider pretty good, then I think Alabama has too much overall in terms of talent on defense and offense for Clemson to be able to be productive and win the game. And that's not to say Clemson doesn't have a chance. I don't feel that way at all. But as I look at the two teams, I would have to lean to Alabama just based on putting a lot of credence in this last game, because that's the Alabama that we're looking at now. We're looking at a team that has a quarterback who's confident, who's playing with more options, if you will. He feels good about his receivers, and they feel good about him. They're going up and making him look good by making some great catches and things like that. And I think defensively they're in a position where they can just swallow things up. Now, with that being said, my justification on the Clemson side of things is, they looked good too in their semifinal game, and they showed the kind of flexibility that has historically bothered Alabama's defenses. When the teams that have beaten Alabama in recent years are teams typically that have pretty good diversity and have an athletic quarterback, if not a flat-out running quarterback. And certainly, Clemson has that. But I just have this feeling that Alabama's ready for that this time. I think Nick Saban has probably heard enough about his inability to stop athletic quarterbacks, and that he will have those guys ready to go.
All right. So what do you think in terms of a score?
Wow, score's going to be tough. I think this is going to be like a lot of championship games where early on it's going to be a little bit of a feeling out process. So I'm going to say that early on it will be competitive. There won't be a ton of scoring. But as you get into the second quarter and you go towards the halftime, all of a sudden there'll be maybe a flurry of scoring there right towards the end of the half, and one of the other team is going to start to exert itself. I expect it will be Alabama, much like the Michigan State game transpired. I think you're going to see a similar arc of progression where Alabama has some success late in the second quarter, and then comes out in the third quarter and really begins to establish themselves. And then in the fourth, it becomes their game. But I do expect Clemson to have more offensive success than, say, Michigan State did, and so that will keep it interesting, probably well into the third quarter.
Okay. How about that score then?
Since it starts out a little slow, I'm going to say it's going to end up like 30, 31 to 14.
31 to 14. Interesting. I'm going to agree with you. After having seen both teams' performances, although I do think Clemson definitely looked good in their game against Oklahoma, Alabama's just absolute dominance on both sides of the line of scrimmage terms of, especially in terms of their line play. Both their offensive line and their defensive line was very, very good, very powerful, and so I think that gives them the edge over Clemson. Now, on the opposite side, Clemson has that fast-paced offense and that ability to throw the ball, and be diverse, which maybe Alabama doesn't have that much speed and, just the overall explosiveness, that they do. So I think that's going to be, if Clemson's going to want to take advantage of that all they can if they want to win this game. And I agree that honestly, Alabama's quarterback up to this point in the season has been just kind of good, not great. He got the job done, didn't make a lot of mistakes, but he wasn't being that exceptional. But in the MSU game, his completion percentage was ridiculously high. So I agree with you that if he plays like he did there, Clemson's going to have a much harder time. But if they can throw off his rhythm and make him play a bit more like how we've seen him before, then it might be a different story. But I'm going to predict an Alabama victory at the end of the day, and I'm going to go for a bit more high-scoring game. I'm going to say it's going to be 38 to 31.
Okay, 38-31. So a little bit more scoring.
Yep.
Good deal. Good deal. I like it. I like it. You may be right, man. I mean, it might up becoming really explosive because you've got thing that's different. Although this is a Nick Saban team, he does have Lane Kiffin as his coordinator on offense, and I have a feeling Lane will be pretty aggressive.
Oh yeah. Alrighty then. Well, this was a good podcast.
It was
nice to recap the bowl season. A little sad that we basically have one more podcast left about this college football season, and then we're done. We're looking ahead to 2016 season.
That's right. That's right. And as we talked when you were home, hopefully we'll be able to set up a series of conversations about more global kind of issues or items to talk about the sport that we love and where we might want to see it change or improve or go back to what used to be, even in some cases. So that's kind of exciting for us here at the football throwdown, that we're going to be able to continue to have interesting conversations.
That's right. And we had quite an extensive talk actually while we were driving. You were driving me to the airport about the Huskers and the schedule and what that means for Mike Riley in terms of the future of the program. So I think we'd like to do a kind of an analysis podcast on that in the future as well.
Right. Absolutely. All right, buddy.
Cool. Well, if you out there enjoyed this podcast, you can email us at huskerpete13@gmail.com. You can find us online at footballthrowdown.podomatic.com. You can leave us comments, ratings, reviews there. Where you can also find us on iTunes. We're under College Football Throwdown there. You can do the same. Rate, comment, subscribe. We always like hearing from our listeners. And thank you guys for listening. And we look forward to closing out this season of podcasts with the national championship game. Hopefully it'll be with something with a lot to talk about, a lot of excitement. And until next time, go Big Red.
Go Big Red.